A poor single dad lost all three of his jobs after saving a struggling waitress from a ruthless millionaire. Until she revealed she was actually the sole heiress to a $10 billion tech empire. Before the story continues, tell me what state or country you're watching from in the comments below. Your comment helps this story reach more people. And if you believe that true karma always wins, don't forget to subscribe. The neon sign outside the 24/7 diner flickered, casting a sickly yellow light over the cracked vinyl booths. It was 2 a.m., the hour when the city usually belongs to the desperate or the dangerous. Vance sat in the darkest corner booth, wearing a frayed canvas jacket that had seen better winters. He stared at a cup of cold, bitter coffee, trying to gather enough energy for his third job of the day, a 3 a.m. paper delivery route. At home, his 7-year-old daughter, Rue, was fast asleep under a worn blanket. Since his wife passed away from cancer, Vance's entire existence had been reduced to a punishing cycle of exhaustion just to keep food on their small table. The bell above the door chimed, and trouble walked in. 3 men in expensive, tailored suits stumbled into the diner. They reeked of high-end alcohol and untouchable arrogance. The one leading the group, a millionaire investor named Trent, carried himself like he owned the building and everyone inside it. A young waitress named Sloane, her apron stained with grease and coffee, approached their table with a tired but polite smile. "What can I get for you gentlemen tonight?" she asked. Trent didn't look at the menu. He looked at Sloane. With a cruel, entitled smirk, he reached out and grabbed her wrist, his grip like a vice. "I'm not hungry for diner food, sweetheart," Trent slurred, pulling her closer. His friends laughed, a harsh, ugly sound that cut through the quiet diner. "Sir, please let go of me," Sloane said, her voice tight. She tried to pull her arm back, but Trent's grip only tightened. "I didn't say you could leave," he sneered. "Let go of me. Now!" she demanded a second time, panic starting to edge into her voice. "Don't be rude," Trent said, squeezing her wrist so hard that Sloane winced in visible pain. "I said stay." Vance slowly scanned the diner. There were 4 other customers. Every single one of them suddenly found their cold fries fascinating. They kept their heads down, entirely unwilling to risk their own safety for a waitress being harassed by men who clearly had the money to destroy anyone who crossed them. The silence in the room was deafening. It was the suffocating silence of a world that looks the other way. Vance let out a slow, heavy sigh. He didn't have the time or the money for a fight, but he was a former Marine, and the one thing the Corps had permanently wired into his bones was a total intolerance for bullies. He stood up. His heavy boots made no sound as he crossed the linoleum floor. He stopped right behind Trent. The air around the table suddenly seemed to drop by 10 degrees. "Let her go," Vance said. His voice wasn't a shout. It was a low, terrifyingly calm rumble that carried the undeniable authority of a man who had seen real combat. Trent scoffed, refusing to release Sloane's wrist. He turned around, looking Vance up and down with absolute disgust. "Who do you think you are, trash? Mind your own business before I—" Trent lunged, throwing a sloppy, drunken punch aimed straight at Vance's jaw. Vance didn't even blink. He moved with lightning speed, catching Trent's wrist mid-air. In one fluid, brutal motion, Vance twisted the joint, applying precise, excruciating pressure. He didn't break the bone, but the pain sent Trent crashing to his knees on the dirty diner floor, instantly releasing Sloane. "I said," Vance whispered coldly, leaning down so only Trent could hear. "Let her go." Trent gasped in pain, his arrogance evaporating into pure fear. His two friends backed away, raising their hands in surrender. Vance released the lock, and Trent scrambled to his feet, cradling his wrist. "You're going to regret this," Trent hissed, his eyes burning with a humiliated, toxic rage. "I'm going to ruin your miserable life." The three men stormed out of the diner. Vance turned to make sure the trembling waitress was okay, completely unaware that the arrogant millionaire was about to make good on his threat and turn Vance's world into a living nightmare. The morning sun hadn't even fully broken over the city skyline when the retaliation began. Trent wasn't just an arrogant drunk in a tailored suit. He was a venture capitalist with deep pockets, ruthless connections, and a vicious PR team. By 8 a.m., an edited security video from the diner was trending across every local social media network. The footage had been masterfully and maliciously spliced. It completely cut out the moments of Trent grabbing Sloane's wrist. It silenced his drunken, entitled threats. It only showed Vance, a large, intimidating man in a frayed canvas jacket, violently grabbing the arm of a seemingly innocent patron and forcing him to his knees on the dirty floor. The headline below the video flashed in bold letters: "Unstable former Marine attacks local investor unprovoked." Trent had the money to make sure a lie traveled faster than the truth ever could. Vance was sitting at his small kitchen table when his phone rang. It was the manager at the shipping warehouse where he worked the morning shift. The voice on the other end was apologetic but firm. "Vance, corporate saw the video. The comments are a nightmare. People are saying you're a violent liability. We can't have that kind of PR. I'm sorry, but we have to let you go." 2 hours later, his phone rang again. It was his afternoon security supervisor at the lumber yard. "You're a risk, Vance. Hand in your badge today." By noon, the manager of his 3 a.m. paper delivery route didn't even bother to call. He just sent a brief text. "Saw the news. Don't bother showing up tonight." In less than 12 hours, a single act of defending a helpless waitress had systematically destroyed Vance's entire livelihood. 3 exhausting jobs, completely wiped out. Vance slowly set his phone face down on the scratched Formica table. Beside it sat an electricity bill with a thick red stripe printed across the top, a final shut-off notice. He had exactly $42 in his checking account. The crushing, suffocating reality of poverty settled over the room like a heavy winter fog. From the bedroom hallway, the soft sound of small footsteps approached. Rue walked in, rubbing her eyes, wearing oversized wool socks and clutching her worn stuffed bear. She looked up at him, her dark eyes entirely trusting and innocent to the cruelty of the world outside their door. "Dad?" she asked, her voice sleep-heavy and sweet. "Are we still going to the park today?" Vance looked at his 7-year-old daughter. He thought about the nearly empty refrigerator. He thought about the freezing winter approaching and the red stripe on the bill. A terrifying weight pressed down on his chest, making it hard to breathe. For the first time since he left the military, Vance wondered if his integrity was a luxury he couldn't afford. He had done the right thing, the only thing a good man should do, and because of it, his little girl was going to suffer. He reached out, pulled Rue into his lap, and wrapped his strong arms fiercely around her, burying his face in her shoulder to hide the absolute despair in his eyes. "Yes, sweetheart," he whispered, his voice thick with unshed emotion. "We'll go to the park." He had no jobs, no money, and a millionaire actively trying to ruin his life. But Trent had made a fatal miscalculation. He was about to learn that when you back a combat veteran into a corner and threaten his child's survival, you don't break him. You wake him up. The snow had started to fall by early afternoon, covering the cracks in the pavement outside Vance's apartment building. He had spent the last 4 hours making calls, swallowing his pride, and begging for any shift, anywhere. Every single door had been slammed in his face. Trent's PR machine had done its job flawlessly. Vance was officially a toxic liability. But poverty wasn't what finally broke him. It was the text message. At 3:15 p.m., Vance's cheap prepaid phone vibrated against the Formica kitchen counter. He opened the message from an unknown number. There were no words at first, just an image. It was a high-resolution photograph of Rue. She was at the school playground, wearing her oversized wool socks and her bright pink winter coat, sitting on the swings. The photo had been taken through the chain-link fence from a parked car, capturing her completely unaware and entirely vulnerable. Vance's blood turned to absolute ice. Then the follow-up text arrived. Post a video on your knees begging for my forgiveness by 6 p.m. Or maybe your little girl has a terrible accident on her walk home. The city is so dangerous these days. The plastic casing of the phone cracked under the sudden, terrifying pressure of Vance's grip. The crushing despair of the morning evaporated, instantly incinerated by something far more dangerous. The quiet, exhausted single father disappeared. The Marine woke up. Trent thought he was playing a corporate game of reputation, wealth, and leverage. He didn't understand that he had just threatened the child of a man trained to dismantle enemy compounds in the dark. Vance didn't care about his reputation anymore. He didn't care about the news, and he certainly didn't care about going to federal prison. If Trent wanted a violent monster, Vance was going to give him one. He walked to his bedroom closet, bypassed the frayed canvas jacket, and pulled a heavy, solid steel wrench from his old military toolbox. He tucked it into the waistband of his jeans and pulled a dark coat over it. He was going to find the millionaire, and he was going to end this. Permanently. Vance stormed down the stairs and threw open the front doors of his apartment building, the freezing wind hitting his face. But he didn't take a single step forward. Blocking his path, parked illegally across the cracked sidewalk, was a massive armored black Mercedes Maybach. The engine purred with a deep, expensive hum. The tinted rear window smoothly glided down. Vance froze, his hand instinctively dropping to the heavy steel wrench at his waist. Sitting in the plush leather interior wasn't a team of Trent's highly paid thugs. It was Sloane, the terrified, grease-stained waitress from the diner. Only she wasn't wearing a diner apron anymore. She was dressed in a sharp, immaculately tailored designer suit, her posture flawless, radiating an aura of absolute, untouchable authority. She looked at Vance's tense posture, the lethal rage burning in his eyes, and the outline of the weapon under his coat. "Get in, Vance," Sloane said. Her voice was no longer trembling and weak. It was commanding, calm, and terrifyingly powerful. "You're not going to throw your life away for a piece of trash like Trent. I have a much better plan." The interior of the Maybach was completely silent as the heavy armored doors sealed them inside. Vance kept his hand near the wrench at his waist, his eyes locked on the woman he had saved 24 hours ago. "My name is Sloane Vanguard," she said quietly, handing him a glass of water from the car's console. "My father is the founder of Vanguard Technologies. I'm the sole heir to the company. I was working the night shift at that diner undercover to gather real-world data for an AI security initiative designed to protect vulnerable service workers." She looked at Vance, her expression filled with profound respect. "You were the only person in that diner who didn't look the other way. You threw away your safety to protect a waitress you didn't even know. Now, it's my turn to protect your daughter." Vance slowly let his hand drop away from his weapon. For the first time all day, he took a deep breath. 45 minutes later, the Maybach pulled up to the Grand Sterling Hotel. Inside the glittering, crystal-lit ballroom, Trent was holding a glass of expensive champagne, surrounded by laughing executives. He was celebrating. In less than 10 minutes, he was scheduled to sign a $50 million infrastructure partnership with Vanguard Technologies, a deal that would cement his status as untouchable. He took a sip of his champagne, feeling like a king, until the heavy mahogany doors of the ballroom swung open. The room gradually fell silent. Sloane walked in, radiating absolute, terrifying authority in a perfectly tailored designer suit. But it wasn't the billionaire heiress that made Trent's jaw drop. It was the man walking right beside her. Vance strode into the ballroom of millionaires, wearing his faded canvas jacket and heavy work boots. He didn't look out of place. He walked with the lethal, unshakable bearing of a combat veteran who knew he owned the room. Trent's arrogant smirk quickly returned. He assumed Vance had tracked him down to publicly beg for mercy.
"Look at this!"
Trent laughed loudly, pointing his glass at Vance as they approached the stage.
"The violent trash from the diner came to apologize. Did you bring the video I asked for, or do I need to make a phone call about your kid?"
Sloane stepped up to the microphone at the center of the stage. She didn't yell. She spoke with a quiet, lethal calm that echoed through the massive room. "Before Vanguard Technologies signs any contracts tonight," Sloane announced, her eyes fixed entirely on Trent, "I want to highlight the true character of our new partner." She snapped her fingers. The massive presentation screens behind her flashed to life. It wasn't Trent's heavily edited, silent social media video. It was the raw, unedited 4K security footage, directly from the diner's servers, complete with crystal-clear audio. The entire ballroom of elite investors watched in horror as Trent brutally grabbed Sloane's wrist. They heard her beg him to let go. They heard Trent slur, "I didn't say you could leave." And they watched Vance step in calmly, only using force after Trent violently threw the first punch. Trent went completely pale. His champagne flute slipped from his fingers and shattered on the marble floor. "But that isn't the worst part," Sloane continued, her voice turning to ice. The screen shifted, displaying the photograph of little Rue on the swings, followed by the terrifying, blackmailing text message Trent had sent just hours ago. "This man," Sloane said, pointing directly at Trent, "threatened the life of a 7-year-old child to protect his own fragile ego." The room erupted into outraged gasps. The Vanguard board members looked at Trent with absolute, total disgust. "The $50 million contract is canceled," Sloane declared, tearing the legal document in half and letting the pieces fall to the stage.
"And Vanguard Technologies will personally ensure that you never do business in this city again."
Before Trent could even stammer an excuse, the ballroom doors opened again. 2 uniformed police officers stepped inside holding handcuffs. They were arresting him for blackmail, extortion, and child endangerment. As the officers dragged a humiliated, ruined Trent past them, Vance looked down at the terrified millionaire. He didn't gloat. He simply leaned in and whispered the exact same words he had used at the diner. "I told you to let her go."
2 weeks after the ballroom incident, the freezing winter seemed to finally break, giving way to the early, hopeful warmth of spring. Vance stood in the immaculate, glass-walled lobby of Vanguard Technologies. He wasn't wearing his frayed canvas jacket anymore. He wore a crisp, tailored, dark suit that perfectly framed his broad shoulders and the quiet, undeniable authority of a combat veteran. The private elevator chimed, and Sloane stepped out. She smiled, a genuine, warm expression that completely transformed her formidable CEO persona back into the kind woman Vance had first met at the diner. She handed him a thick, leather-bound folder. "I told the board that our new AI initiative is designed to protect vulnerable people," Sloane said, walking with him toward a massive corner office overlooking the city. "But an algorithm can't teach a company about courage, integrity, or the human cost of looking the other way. I don't just want you to protect my servers, Vance. I want you to protect my people." Vance opened the folder. It was an employment contract for the Director of Global Security at Vanguard Technologies. The salary printed on the second page was more money than Vance had ever seen in his entire life. It included full medical benefits, a pristine corporate apartment, and a fully funded educational trust for Rue. Vance looked at the numbers, his throat suddenly incredibly tight. "Sloane," he started, his voice rough with emotion. "I didn't step in at the diner for a reward. I just did what any decent man should have done." "I know," Sloane replied softly, placing a hand on his arm. "And that is exactly why you are the only man I trust with this job. You didn't know I was a billionaire. You thought I was a nobody, and you risked everything to save me anyway. Please, Vance, let me do this for your family." Vance looked down at the contract, thinking of the red shut-off notices, the empty refrigerator, and the freezing apartment. He took a deep breath, picked up a pen from the desk, and signed his name. That afternoon, Vance didn't have to rush to a warehouse, a lumber yard, or a freezing paper route. Instead, he stood by the chain-link fence of the elementary school, waiting for the final bell to ring. When Rue ran out, wearing her bright pink coat and her oversized wool socks, she stopped dead in her tracks. She looked at her father in his immaculate suit, her dark eyes wide with innocent wonder. Vance knelt down on the pavement and opened his arms. Rue ran into them, burying her face in his shoulder. "Dad, you look like a secret agent from the movies," she giggled. Vance laughed, burying his face in her hair, tears of profound relief finally falling from his eyes. "We're gonna be okay, little bird," he whispered, holding her tighter than he ever had. "We are finally going to be okay." That weekend, Vance and Rue moved into a beautiful, sunlit home in a quiet, safe neighborhood. They didn't have to eat cold cereal for dinner anymore, and as they sat around their new dining table, the doorbell rang. Rue ran to answer it and beamed. Standing on the porch was Sloane, holding a warm apple pie and a brand-new coloring book. As Vance watched the billionaire heiress sit on the floor to color with his daughter, he realized something profound. The world could be a dark, cruel place, filled with people who look the other way. But as long as there are people willing to stand up and fight for the light, the darkness will never win. In a world where it's so easy to look the other way, true courage is choosing to stand up when everyone else remains seated. Vance didn't have money, power, or influence. He had 3 exhausting jobs and a little girl who depended on him for survival. He had every reason to stay quiet, but he chose his integrity over his safety. Trent thought his wealth made him untouchable, forgetting that karma has a beautiful, unforgiving way of finding the truth. Sloane's intervention proves that genuine kindness is never wasted. It ripples outwards, often returning to us when we need it most.
Never be afraid to be the one person who does the right thing, even when you are standing alone. Disclaimer. While this specific narrative is an original work of fiction created to inspire, it reflects the very real courage of those who stand against harassment and the unseen struggles of single parents everywhere. We create these stories to inspire and heal. Any resemblance to real persons or actual events is purely coincidental. If you believe that doing the right thing is always worth the risk, type the word courage in the comments below. We love reading your thoughts. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more emotional stories that touch the heart. See you in the next video.